So I thought long and hard about whether I should make this video. And very honestly, initially I didn't want to. But several conversations that I've had with other guitarists as well as other non guitarists convinced me that there was something in my experience and the perspective that I could provide from this experience that could be, at the very least, interesting, if not a little bit helpful. So, as the thumbnail suggests, I'm 37 years old and I own, I think, about 80 guitars, probably 81, 82, maybe 79. I'm not really sure. So it didn't start off with an intent to be a collector. I still don't really consider myself a collector. And the journey towards getting here was very organic. So there are 2 or 3 things that I want to cover. One is how I got here, obviously. But second, why do I continue to own 80 guitars, much more than you would need functionally? All, I wouldn't say crammed, but definitely fit in an economical way into my music room. Why do I continue to own 80 guitars? And as you will see in a second, they are not worth an insubstantial amount of money. So that's also something to consider. There is some method behind the madness of doing this. So I own 80 guitars, I think. The interesting thing is I got my first electric guitar at the age of 19, an Epiphone Les Paul. And for the next 10 years, I had just one electric guitar, which was the Epiphone Les Paul. I mean, I also owned a Strat that my friend left with me when he left for Europe, but it wasn't really my guitar. So I played one guitar till the age of 29. I got my second guitar at the age of 29. First guitar at 19, which was a Epiphone double neck. Yeah, I do like my Epiphones. And then from 2015 onwards till now 2023, something happened. And over a period of time, then I got a PRS Custom 22 when I went to Japan for the first time on business trip in 2015. And then over a period of time, this just kept expanding. I'm not going to go through the journey in detail, but essentially the highlights are that I really got into guitars. I had more spare cash than I had previously because I had done the big things such as pay off my student loan and pay down the mortgage for a house, etc. And the third thing that happened is that I got an assignment to Japan. And where my office was located was just 3 stops away from Uchanomizu Guitar Street. So I used to work 50% of the time in Japan, 50% in Singapore. So the consequence was that I just had the access and the knowledge and the temptation, and then it kind of grew. I bought many guitars, I sold many guitars. Do I own 80 guitars now? I was looking at my sold guitars page the other day. I have sold about 40 or 50, so that probably means that I've owned about 120, 130 guitars over this 7-year crazy period. So I want to talk about why I have so many. There's a functional and there's an emotional and there's a financial aspect to it, importantly. And I want to talk about each of these things. I'll talk about the financial aspect first, right? Because it's something that's not that well understood. And every time you make a video about something to do with guitar and financials, it tends to get a lot of polarized opinions and a lot of things like, hey, guitars, they're not an asset, or you buy a guitar, you lose 30%, all of that. So what I want to say is there are some financial reasons to own certain guitars. That should not be a primary reason for keeping it, but essentially a used guitar, not a new guitar, unless some specific new guitars, a used guitar is at the bare minimum an inflation hedge. What does an inflation hedge mean? It means that the value of that thing goes up at the rate of inflation. That may or may not be the case. That may not be the case if you are selling to a dealer and buying from a dealer necessarily, because dealers need to make the margin. But if you are capable of buying and selling, or particularly selling by yourself, it's the perfect inflation hedge. The second part of it is really scarcity. There are certain guitars you just can't get. And the interesting thing with electric guitars, and that makes it different from, say, something like cars, but makes it very similar to something like watches, but even more scarcity inducing than watches, is that electric guitars are very cheap to maintain. It's not like a car that you need to pay road tax, you need to service it. If you know how to service it yourself, which I do, it's cost all of zero or maybe $10 a year, maybe a pair of strings, maybe some consumables. And the scarcity is driven by the fact of they were made to certain specifications, of course, but good wood is constantly on a declining supply. And the older you go, you find more, you get woods that weren't available, you get better quality woods. So even if someone can make a new guitar today, they cannot make it from the same quality of woods. So that scarcity of not just the guitar and the making techniques and the people who made the guitar, but also the material used to make the guitar gives it a scarcity, which tends to give some used guitars a much higher increase in value compared to inflation. So bare minimum for used guitar is inflation. Some used guitars, if you pick carefully, have that. Now, this doesn't mean that you go and buy any mass-produced amazing instrument, but not very much of not much scarcity value, not much intangible value beyond the functional use as an instrument. If you buy something like that, this is not going to happen. This happens for specific runs. And the third aspect of it really is, for me, is the emotional utility that you get from owning a guitar versus, say, just putting it in a deposit and getting, say, 3% or whatever. As I've said, a used guitar will give you an inflation hedge at a minimum, maybe more, but you derive a lot of value when you play it and you enjoy it. And the thing with some of the guitars, particularly a lot of guitars that I own, is they are impossible to replace. I have guitars that have Brazilian rosewood necks. They don't make them anymore other than very, very limited runs. I have guitars that were that stopped production 20 years ago, but were very iconic at the time, something like the first generation Tremonti. I have guitars that are linked to particular moments in pop history, and that's another big part of this whole guitar piece. You don't have to be a guitarist, or you don't have to be an involved guitarist, but music affects us all. There are songs that remind us of a certain period of time. I would argue the Gibson business model of making small variations on a Sunburst Les Paul and charging crazy amounts of money is just built on people trying to reclaim that nostalgia. And you can't put a price on that. And there are certain guitars that people associate with certain periods in their life because of certain artists, and that is always going to be the case. So there's that. So that's the financial aspect of it. So just to summarize in 3 points, at the bare minimum inflation hedge, some of them go beyond inflation hedge because of scarcity or because of being linked to particular moments, nostalgic memories of people. And while this investment is earning the minimum amount of money of inflation hedge, if not higher, you are able to enjoy it, which is unlike any other investment. All this assumes that you are able to sell guitars, you're fairly handsy like I am, you're able to maintain guitars. That's the first financial aspect. Let's talk a little bit about the functional and the emotional aspect of it. Now, the functional aspect of it is that for me, I am not just a guitarist who plays 6-string rock, which a lot of us do. I do that. That's where I started. I mean, my bread and butter was learning how to play some Guns N' Roses, some Led Zeppelin, all of that. But over the years, I've expanded to 7-string guitar, 8-string guitar, baritone guitar, and multiple tunings. And functionally, it is just so easy for me because I have guitars in all the tunings: E, E flat, D, C sharp, C, B for the baritone, A standard for the baritone. That's just 6-string guitars. Then I have 7-string guitars. They have multiple tunings as well, 8-string. You do the math. I did the math. I have about 25 different tunings in the guitars behind me. That makes life, honestly, very easy. If I want to just play a song, I want to learn a song, or I hear something I like and I want to figure it out, I don't have to go tune. And of course, you can use all the electronic tools. You can use what you get in, say, Neural DSP with the plugins, etc., or a pitch pedal. But reality is nothing like the real thing. And if you can do it, you just do it. So that's what I do. And that makes life much easier. So there's the functional aspect of it. So though there's an emotional and a financial value, functionally this makes my life as a guitarist, as an involved guitarist, just so much easier and makes me so much happier and so much more efficient. I will call out as well that, right, I was a decent enough regular guitarist. I could play all your regular cover band rock stuff. And in the period of time that I've been involved with electric guitar more closely, since I got my second guitar at the age of 29 in 2015, my chops have gone up by bounds, means and bounds. So when you have these guitars, you feel like playing them. I'm not someone to just look at them. I've just hung them up here. One, they look nice, but also more out of convenience. All the guitars there are ones that I keep playing different tunings. So it has really helped improve my chops as well. And I want to get to the emotional value, right? So there are certain guitars that just have an intangible emotional value. Some of them are expensive, some of them are not that expensive. The Epiphone Les Paul, which is my first guitar, is, I don't know how much it's worth, $150, $200 now. I love it, so I keep it for that reason. I won't sell it for that. Why would I sell it? What will I do with an extra $150? So there are guitars like that. There are guitars that you really wanted, and when you got it, and if you sell it now, you're never going to get one again. For me, a lot of the PRS extended range guitars that I have, the 7 strings and the 8 strings, are really falling into that camp because PRS has stopped making 8 string guitars, and even the 7 string guitars are hard to come by. So I have a lot of them sitting around, which I use them functionally, as I said, but I have an emotional value because they're impossible to replace. So even if I sell it, even if I get whatever the $15,000 that one of them may be worth, what will I do? Where will I get the same thing if I really enjoy that particular thing? Let me be clear, it is a pain to own 80 guitars, to maintain 80 guitars, and it is a significant capital lockup, which I'll get to in a second. Now, getting to how much the whole thing is worth and why I do that, I want to give 2 caveats. Number one is, if you're trying to make an investment, an inflation hedge which is semi-liquid, because guitars are semi-liquid, you can't just sell them that easily. It takes time unless you want to take a haircut. So as a semi-liquid inflation hedge, that is not where all your money should go. It's only a certain portion of your capital that should go there. That's the caveat, right? So that's how I look at it. In fact, I would argue I have a bit too much in there, but then the emotional value that I get from some of the guitars, for me, are like, okay, I am putting a little bit too much in this semi-liquid asset class, but you know what? I get a lot of value out of it. They're insured, so that the money is safe. I renew the insurance every year, a certain amount of money. In Singapore, luckily, insurance is very low because a very low crime country, etc. So it kind of makes sense for me. So with that said, this does not mean you go out and spend all your money if you don't have money to eat or whatever. You don't have liquid cash flow for like 6 months or 12 months. Do all of this only once you have that basic thing done, right? You should have your cash flow for like 6 months or a year or whatever the financial gurus say. After all of that said, I'm not going to give you a number. I'm actually going to show you the number because I actually have my insurance statement. I'm going to cut it out and you can see the actual number. And yeah, there it is. And it is a very high number. But for me, as proportionate to other things and other investments, assets that I have, it's high, but it's not all my money. It is not something that that keeps me awake at night. Let's just say that. So yeah, so here's why. At the age of 37, I own 80 guitars and I continue to keep them for a certain amount of time. Hope this was fun. Till next time.